Certain things have come to be expected from almost any movie villain, whether it be a particular action, a motivation, or certain aspects of the character themselves. Antagonists come in all shapes and sizes, but there is usually a common denominator or two to be found. One of them is a master plan. Whether buying into the trope of revealing the details of their grand scheme to the wrong person at the wrong time or not, there is typically a plot that the bad guy has mapped out, and sometimes it involves them being caught on purpose, which on the surface can seem pretty unusual. So let's take a look at the best example, shall we? I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are 10 movie villains who wanted to be caught. Number 10. Joker and Bane, The Dark Knight Trilogy. There are a lot of similarities between Heath Ledger's Joker and Tom Hardy's Bane from Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Trilogy. They both targeted Batman, which kind of goes without saying. They both began the film covering their faces, and throughout the events of their individual plans, they both intended to be caught. Compared to the rest of what he did, this was actually a rather small part of Joker's scheme. He allowed Batman and Commissioner Gordon to lock him up so he could break out of jail with criminal accountant Lau accompanying him, so he could learn the location of the Gotham mobster's money pot. Joker himself said it wasn't about the money, so he burned the pile of dollar bills with Lau sitting on top. Bane's entire plan, however, hinged on his capture at the beginning. You know, the whole "by crashing this plane" scene. Always wanted to do that voice in a voiceover. Maybe I have already, I've forgotten. Anyway, before Bane did anything else, he got himself taken by the CIA in order to get on the same plane as Dr. Pavel. This allowed Bane to fake the Doctor's death and kidnap him at the same time, allowing him to work on the nuclear bomb that he would later threaten Gotham with. Number 9. Khan! Star Trek Into Darkness. Benedict Cumberbatch brought the legendary Khan to life, previously portrayed by the impossibly chiseled Ricardo Montalban, and he outmatched the crew of the Enterprise in just about every way. As an enhanced superhuman, the man initially under the alias of John Harrison knew he could overpower anyone he came up against, and was able to use that to his advantage. There was absolutely no reason for Khan to surrender to Kirk when he did, other than the fact that he wanted to. While under attack, he hid his comrades within the torpedoes he had designed for Starfleet. However, he was discovered and forced to flee alone. When Khan learned that those same torpedoes were on board the USS Enterprise with Kirk, he willingly surrendered himself. The plan from there was simple. After jumping across to the USS Vengeance with Kirk, the villain overthrew this new ship and took the vessel hostage. He threatened Spock on the Enterprise with a deadly attack if the torpedoes weren't returned to him. It would have been a smart and successful plan had Spock not been one step ahead, because he's Spock, firing the torpedoes at the Vengeance, having already safely extracted those encapsulated within. Number 8. Loki, The Avengers. After being introduced separately across a handful of movies, and years before he'd be redeemed as a wig-wearing anti-hero, the Avengers brought Earth's mightiest heroes together to fight Tom Hiddleston's Loki and a big army of Shatari aliens. The God of Mischief had attacked S.H.I.E.L.D. with his scepter, stolen the Tesseract, and fled into the night as the headquarters crashed to the ground all around Nick Fury. While Bruce Banner was brought in to help locate the Tesseract, it was initially Captain America who was first sent after the Asgardian prince. Steve Rogers was all over the place. All it took for Loki to ultimately concede defeat, despite his dominant position, was a visit from RDJ's Iron Man. However, both Rogers and Fury knew this wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Cap knew he had given up too easily, and Fury noted that Loki was the only one who wanted to be on the Helicarrier. Getting caught was always part of his plan. Loki knew the Avengers were his biggest threat, and by getting them together in one big old room, he was able to break the alliance into multiple pieces. This moment did somewhat backfire, courtesy of some Fury deception, but getting caught allowed Loki to preempt his biggest challenge in Earth's mightiest heroes. Number 7. John Kramer, Saw 2. When Tobin Bell's John Kramer made his cinematic debut as the Jigsaw Killer back in Saw in 2004, he manipulated two people into playing his gruesome and deadly game. In Saw 2, which released the following year, his game had evolved considerably, as he trapped no fewer than 8 people in a brand spanking new setup. However, though almost all of the 8 made it to the end still breathing, they were not the real target. No, that honor belonged to Donnie Wahlberg's detective Eric Matthews. It was for his benefit, and his benefit only, that the show The Game was even put on. Kramer targeted Eric because he was a bad cop. He used intimidation, aggression, and violence to his own advantage, and he framed innocent people for the fun of it. Of the 8 people in the game, 7 were those he had framed for a conviction, while the other was his son. Naturally, Matthews would run into danger to save his child, which was exactly Jigsaw's plan. The endgame of this was to trap Matthews, allowing him to be the first victim of Kramer's successor, Amanda, played by Shawnee Smith, but for this to work, the detective had to know what was going on. Kramer was then willing to get caught by Matthews for this to happen, and so literally invited the police, specifically Matthews, to his base to watch the whole thing unfold and spring his deliciously bloody trap. Number 6. Hans Landa, Inglourious Bastards. Quentin Tarantino has brought to life plenty of incredible characters throughout his time behind the camera, but none have been more chilling or evil than Colonel Hans Landa. Christoph Waltz's flawless performance saw him win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 2010, a truly ruthless Nazi officer who hunted down Jewish people hiding in occupied France. During the premiere of Nation's Pride, Landa discovered the Bastards bombs that would have taken out Adolf Hitler, Joseph Goebbels, Hermann Goering, and Martin Bormann, and a move that would have ended World War II in one fell swoop. When he took Aldo Rain prisoner, he easily could have killed him and informed his superiors of the plot to kill the Fuhrer. But instead, he volunteered himself for conditional surrender. Essentially, Landa worked himself a deal in which he would have been painted as a heroic double agent for the Allies, and received high honors, as well as property on the island of Nantucket. His plan did work to a degree, though he didn't reckon with Aldo Rain forever branding him as a Nazi, as he had done to so many members of the SS before him. Number 5. Clyde Shelton, Law-Abiding Citizen. When Clyde Shelton's wife and daughter were killed at the beginning of Law Abiding Citizen, Gerard Butler's character was changed forever. Thanks to Jamie Foxx's Nick Rice agreeing a plea deal with Clarence Darby, the man who killed Shelton's family, the murderer was out on the streets in no time at all. But 10 years later, old Jerry Butts got his revenge on the 2 home invaders, torturing and killing Darby, and ensuring that his accomplice's painless death sentence was anything but. He was then happily arrested and taken to prison, which is exactly where he wanted to be. From here, he entered into a full-scale war on the entire justice system, something that he planned on doing from the inside. After murdering his cellmate, Shelton was sent into solitary confinement, where he had access to a previously built tunnel that led directly to a base of operations. While he was thought to be locked up, Clyde was able to leave prison through this tunnel at will, and continue to systematically murder members of the American justice system. Clyde was a master tactician, and if he was in prison, it was only because he wanted to be. Number 4. The Riddler, the Batman. One of the many things that the Batman got right in 2022 was its villain. There is a ridiculously high expectation for cinematic Batman baddies, but Paul Dino's Riddler is up there with the very best. He was ruthless, he had a supposed moral code by which he committed his crimes, and he was extremely intelligent. The final flourish of his plan to attack Gotham City, after targeting the powerful and corrupt, came with breaking the seawall and flooding the city altogether. Since there would be very few places that would ensure anyone's safety, the Riddler made sure he was captured and taken to the unconventional sanctuary of Arkham Asylum. It wasn't just protection that he was after when he was arrested though, as in his mind, he and Batman had been on the same page all along, and he thought he could match the madness unfold with Bruce Wayne by his side. He was wrong, but at least with his incarceration, he was able to meet the Joker, something which is sure to be explored in a future sequel. Number 3. The Narrator, Fight Club. A slightly different entry on the list here is the only villain who wanted to be caught not as part of a larger plan, but to be legitimately stopped. The narrator's relationship with Tyler Durden evolves incredibly quickly throughout Fight Club, and within days of their chance meeting on an airplane, they are living together and have conceived the idea of the titular Fight Club together. Of course, this swift pace makes more sense when they reveal that they are the same person. When the penny did finally drop and Norton found out that he was Durden and that Project Mayhem was all his doing, he tried to turn himself into the police. He even told them about Bob's body being buried in the backyard. However, 3 of the officers he spoke to happened to be a part of Durden's cult and had been given strict instructions of what to do if he came to the police. In other words, Durden outsmarted the narrator and left him without any help from the authorities. Number 2. Mickey Altieri, Scream 2. There have been several people to don the iconic ghost face mask throughout the Scream franchise, and most of them have the same thing in common as they have with most serial killers. Generally, they don't want to be caught. If they did, well, there wouldn't be a need to wear the mask, would there? However, Timothy Oliphant's Mickey Altieri, the man who took up the Ghostface mantle in Scream 2, which is my personal favorite of the series, FYI, did not share the same view. Even though he covered his face, he still wanted the world to know who he was after the fact. Mickey had been killing people even before the events of Scream 2, but met Mrs. Loomis, the mother of original Ghostface Billy Loomis, and took up the alias in order to kill Neve Campbell's Sidney Prescott as revenge for her killing Billy in the original Scream. What Mickey planned to get out of the deal was infamy. After revealing his identity to Sidney, Mickey was betrayed by Mrs. Loomis, and ultimately died before being able to enjoy the infamy he would have garnered after being found out. And number 1. John Doe 7. While most strategies for getting caught are subtle, the antagonist of David Fincher's classic walked straight into the police station covered in blood and announced himself as the mysterious John Doe that Detective Mills and Somerset were looking for. After killing 5 unconnected victims based on the deadly sins, he had 2 kills and 2 sins left to tick off. Part of the plan required extremely close proximity to Detective Mills, and so he willingly handed himself into police custody before saying he would take Mills and Somerset to the last 2 bodies, and Mills and Somerset only. Of course, this was all manipulation by Doe, as there weren't any bodies actually hidden. What there was the head of Mills's wife Tracy, soon to be followed by John Doe's corpse when Mills became Wrath. One of the most ruthlessly brilliant noir endings ever. Man, you just gotta love Fincher.